John Derek confesses secrets behind Linda Evans's divorce. What if the man every woman dreamed of became the man who shattered them all? In the golden age of Hollywood, John Derek had everything: looks, fame, power, and one secret that destroyed a love story everyone believed would last forever. But when he finally confessed what really happened behind Linda Evans's heartbreaking divorce, the truth was darker, deeper, and far more human than anyone imagined. And it all began long before she ever knew. Imagine being born into a world where everyone expects you to shine, and all you want is to disappear behind the camera. John Derek didn't choose fame. He inherited it. Born right in the heart of Hollywood, with a director for a father and an actress for a mother, he was practically raised between spotlights and script pages. Every studio light that hit him as a kid whispered the same message: "You're meant for this." And for a while, it worked. He had that face, the kind of impossible beauty that made agents chase him down Sunset Boulevard. Columbia Pictures signed him faster than you could say leading man. By 23, John Derek was the guy everyone wanted to be, or to be with. He shared the screen with Humphrey Bogart in Knock on Any Door, delivering the line that would outlive him: "Live fast, die young, and leave a good-looking corpse." That line wasn't just dialogue, it was prophecy. But here's the twist. Behind that smooth jawline and half-smile was a man who hated everything Hollywood loved about him. He wasn't chasing fame, he was running from it. He wanted control, not applause. He wanted to create, not perform. To design beauty, not just be trapped inside it. So while the world was falling in love with the image, John Derek was quietly tearing it apart. He picked up a camera, started studying light, angles, shadows, the same tools that once controlled him. Friends said he'd spend hours photographing faces, trying to capture something more than beauty, something he couldn't even name. He didn't realize it yet, but this obsession, this hunger to possess beauty, not just admire it, would one day cost him everything. And the women he loved would pay that price. Because when a man like John Derek tries to turn real people into his perfect picture, the picture always cracks. And soon, one of those cracks would have a name: Linda Evans. When Linda Evans walked into John Derek's life, she was the opposite of everything he'd ever known. No chaos, no ego, no spotlight chasing. She wasn't loud, she glowed. Hollywood was used to women who screamed to be noticed. Linda didn't have to. Her presence did all the talking. John met her in the late 60s, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't see a woman to photograph. He saw peace. Or at least, he thought he did. He'd already burned through 2 marriages, one with Patty Bears, a ballet dancer who gave him stability, and another with Ursula Andress, the first Bond girl who gave him fire. Both ended the same way. John got bored, restless, haunted by the idea that something bigger, something perfect, was still missing. But when he met Linda, that changed. She didn't just admire him, she understood him. She saw the dreamer, the artist, the man who couldn't stop creating even when it hurt him. And he fell, hard. They got married in 1968, and for a while, it looked like the dream had finally found its match. He photographed her endlessly, capturing her in soft, natural light, the way the world would later remember her. Radiant, almost untouchable. Every photo was worship, every frame a love letter. But love for John Derek always came with a camera lens, and behind every lens there was control. He began shaping her image, telling her which roles to take, how to pose, even how to think about herself on film. At first, she believed it was devotion. Later, she realized it was direction. In an interview years later, Linda said, "He taught me how to see myself. But sometimes I think he wanted me to see only what he saw." Their life together was stunning on the outside, 2 icons wrapped in silk and sunlight. But inside, the air was heavy. Linda wanted a husband, John wanted a masterpiece, and masterpieces don't breathe. As his need for artistic control grew, so did her loneliness. She wanted conversation. He wanted silence. She wanted commitment. He wanted inspiration. And for John Derek, inspiration had a dangerous way of showing up, usually in the form of someone new, and that someone was already on her way. From the outside, John Derek and Linda Evans looked like perfection itself. He, the golden Hollywood artist, she, the ethereal beauty who made every camera melt. Together, they were elegance personified, A love story framed in candlelight and flashbulbs. But behind that glossy surface, the frame was beginning to split. At first they were collaborators, partners in creativity, partners in life. John photographed her endlessly, capturing her like she was his greatest discovery. He'd tell her things like, "You don't need the world, Linda. You just need me." And maybe for a while, she believed it. But slowly, his admiration started feeling like a prison. Linda Evans later admitted that John didn't just direct his films. He tried to direct her entire existence. He told her what to wear, what roles to reject, even how to smile in interviews. To him, it wasn't control. It was art. To her, it was suffocating. "He wanted me to depend on him," Linda once said softly, "but I didn't realize how much of myself I was giving away." The irony? Hollywood finally wanted Linda Evans, and John didn't. He didn't want her on sets, around producers, in front of other men's cameras. He wanted her frozen in his own frame, the perfect subject, unchanging, unquestioning. But Linda wasn't built for silence. As she began finding her voice, his fascination began to fade. Late nights turned into arguments. Arguments turned into distance. And distance, in Hollywood, always finds a way to fill itself. Friends would later recall that John had grown moody, withdrawn. He was chasing inspiration, always restless, always looking for something he could mold, something untouched by fame. And in 1973, he found it. Or rather, her. Her name was Mary Kathleen Collins. She was young, too young, a girl on the edge of the industry, wide-eyed, curious, still untouched by Hollywood's chaos. When John Derek met her, something dangerous ignited. Not love, possession. Mary Kathleen Collins. The world would one day know her as Bo Derek. But in 1973, she was just a teenager. 16 years old, sun-kissed, and barely out of high school, when she crossed paths with a 46-year-old filmmaker named John Derek. Their first meeting wasn't in some studio or smoky bar. It was quiet, almost cinematic. John, already frustrated with his marriage and the Hollywood machine, was in the middle of a creative drought. Then he saw her. She wasn't a starlet. She wasn't polished. She was raw, innocent in a way the town had long forgotten. And for a man obsessed with beauty, that kind of purity was dangerous. He started photographing her. At first it was professional, portraits, screen tests, creative experiments. But anyone who's seen those early photos can feel it, the tension behind the lens. It wasn't just admiration, it was temptation, and it didn't stay hidden for long. Whispers started. Whispers that became rumors. Rumors that turned into headlines. John was still married to Linda Evans, and Hollywood was small, too small for secrets. When Linda heard the talk, she didn't want to believe it, but the distance between them had already grown into a canyon. "I remember asking him if there was someone else," Linda later said. "He didn't deny it. He just looked away." Within months, John packed up his life and his camera and left. He left his home, his career, and the woman who had believed in him. He moved to Europe with Bo, where the laws and the judgment were different. And there, in exile, he began to reinvent her. He changed her name. He cut her hair. He sculpted her image until Bo Derek was born, a fantasy of his own making. Hollywood called it scandal. John called it art. When the two finally returned to America, married, the outrage hadn't faded. Tabloids shredded them. Directors blacklisted him. Critics called him a predator, a manipulator, a fallen idol. But behind the fury, there was something else, fascination. Because for all the controversy, the world couldn't look away. Bo was breathtaking. John was unapologetic, and together they were toxic perfection, the kind of story that makes Hollywood impossible to resist. It wasn't about leaving Linda, John once claimed years later. It was about realizing I couldn't live a lie anymore. But even decades later, that truth felt hollow. Because for everyone who loved Linda Evans, and there were millions, the lie was his entire legacy. And yet, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the transformation that would make and destroy him forever. Because the man who ran from Hollywood's control had become its most scandalous creation. That voice, deep, older, stripped of ego, belonged to John Derek. After years of exile, years of headlines calling him everything from a Hollywood rebel to a homewrecker, he finally spoke. No cameras, no stage, just truth. He wasn't defending himself anymore. He was confessing. By the time he gave that interview in the early 90s, the firestorm had faded, but the scars hadn't. He was no longer the golden boy, just an aging artist living quietly, reflecting on what went wrong. And for the first time, he admitted what everyone else already knew. He had destroyed something pure. Linda, he said, was grace. Real grace. Not the kind you fake for cameras. She had this calm, this warmth, and I didn't know how to live with that. I needed storms. He said it without bitterness, just honesty, because John Derek was never addicted to fame or women. He was addicted to creation and destruction. Every time he felt trapped, he'd tear his life apart just to rebuild it prettier. But beauty, he finally realized, isn't something you can own. Linda Evans, meanwhile, had already rebuilt her life. While John and Bo Derek were living in Europe, Linda was rediscovering herself, both as a woman and as an artist. Her career exploded when she starred in Dynasty, becoming one of television's most beloved icons. And when journalists asked her about John years later, she didn't lash out. She smiled, softly, almost sadly, and said, "I don't regret it. He gave me confidence. I learned who I was by surviving what we were." That's when people began to see the story differently, because behind the scandal, behind the betrayal, there was something heartbreakingly human. Two people who loved deeply, but in completely different languages. John chased beauty because he didn't understand peace. Linda craved peace because she'd seen too much beauty destroy people. It was doomed from the start. And yet, in his final years, John couldn't stop talking about her. "If I could tell her one thing," he said quietly, "it's thank you for seeing something good in me, even when I didn't." But redemption in Hollywood never comes without another twist. Because the woman who once broke every rule to be with him, Bo Derek, was about to become both his salvation and his punishment. After leaving Linda Evans, John Derek and Bo Derek vanished. No paparazzi, no press junkets, no premieres. They fled to Europe like fugitives running from their own fame. In Spain, they built their own world: sun, sand, and cameras. He became her mentor, her director, her everything. She became his creation. He changed her name from Mary Kathleen Collins to Bo Derek. He crafted her look, her iconic braids, her natural glow, the untouched beauty that the world would soon obsess over. And when she finally turned 18, he made her his wife. To the tabloids, it was the scandal of the decade. To John, it was destiny fulfilled. He started directing again, pouring his obsession into film. Together they made Tarzan, the Ape Man, 1981, a movie that critics called a fever dream of ego and eroticism. It was controversial, it was wild, and it made Bo Derek a household name, but behind the scenes, the same patterns returned. John still sought perfection, endless retakes, endless adjustments, endless pressure. Bo adored him, but lived in his shadow. To the outside world, she was the fantasy, but privately, she was another muse trapped in a masterpiece she couldn't escape. In interviews years later, Bo Derek admitted, "People called me his creation, and they weren't wrong, but I chose it. I loved him, even when it was hard, even when it cost me everything." Unlike his previous marriages, this one lasted more than 20 years. Maybe because Bo never tried to change him. Maybe because by then, he was too tired to run. Their relationship mellowed into something quieter, not fiery, not explosive, but strangely loyal. And for the first time, John seemed at peace. He stopped chasing fame, stopped defending himself, stopped pretending. He spent his final years behind the camera, photographing the only world he could still control, the one he and Bo built together. Yet, even in that peace, the ghosts of his past never left him. Friends said he'd sometimes stare at old photos of Linda Evans, his American angel as he called her, with a look of bittersweet regret. He'd smile, then look away, as if remembering both heaven and hell in the same breath. And Bo? She never condemned him. When he died in 1998, she described him not as a scandal, but as a misunderstood artist. "John lived by his own rules," she said. "He created beauty, but it always came at a price. I think he knew that." In the end, John Derek became the very thing he ran from, a Hollywood legend defined not by his films, but by his obsessions. To some, he was a genius. To others, a cautionary tale. But to the women who knew him, he was both the dream and the danger. He wanted to capture beauty, one friend once said. But beauty doesn't want to be captured. It wants to be seen. And maybe that's why his story still haunts Hollywood, because it's not just about scandal. It's about what happens when love becomes art, and art becomes control. By the late 90s, John Derek had all but vanished from the Hollywood radar. No premieres, no interviews, no red carpet appearances, just an aging filmmaker in Santa Maria, living in a modest home with Bo Derek, far from the city that once worshipped and later rejected him. But if you walked into his study, you'd still see the ghosts, stacks of photo negatives, old movie posters, frames of Linda Evans captured in soft light, and in the corner, a single untouched reel labeled unfinished. Friends said he used to sit there at night, drink in hand, staring at that reel for hours. He said it reminded him of everything he never finished, in art and in love, one friend revealed. For the first time in decades, he wasn't chasing youth, beauty, or fame. He was chasing peace and maybe forgiveness. And yet the irony was impossible to ignore. The man who spent his entire life trying to control how the world saw him was now seen only through the reflections of those he left behind. Linda Evans, when asked years later if she'd forgiven him, said softly, "I forgave him long before he asked. Because I knew he never meant to hurt anyone. He just didn't know how to stay." That line hit like poetry, a love letter disguised as a postscript. Even Bo Derek, who stood by him until his final breath, spoke about the contradiction of loving a man like John. He could be gentle and kind, but also impossible. He saw the world through the lens of beauty, but sometimes forgot there were people on the other side of that lens. John Derek died quietly, no drama, no flashbulbs, just the sound of a heartbeat monitor and the whisper of an ending. But Hollywood, that never forgets a scandal, suddenly remembered him again, not as a villain, but as a tragic artist who lived too intensely. And maybe, deep down, that's exactly how he wanted to be remembered. Because to John Derek, life itself was a movie, and he was determined to direct every scene, even the ones that broke his heart. Music swells, strings and distant thunder. The screen fills with photographs. Derek laughing on set, Linda in soft light, Bo by his side on a beach at sunset. But what if there was something more? A secret he carried to his grave, one final confession no one ever recorded. After his death, a box of John Derek's personal tapes was found in his home office. Old interviews, film fragments, private monologues he never released. Among them, a tape labeled "For Her." No one knows exactly who Her was meant to be, but when Bo played it, what she heard stunned her. "If this ever reaches you," his voice said, quiet and uncertain, "I want you to know I was never running from love. I was running from myself." That one line, "I was running from myself," became the perfect summary of his entire life. A man chasing perfection in others because he couldn't find peace within. Hollywood loves its scandals. It feeds on betrayal, glamour, and downfall. But John Derek's story, with Linda Evans, with Bo Derek, with every muse who ever crossed his path, was never just about scandal. It was about the hunger for beauty and the loneliness that comes from trying to possess it. He once told a friend, "You can photograph a woman 1,000 times, but you'll never capture her soul. The moment you try, you lose her." And maybe that's what happened with Linda. He loved her beauty so much, he forgot to love her peace. With Bo, he found devotion, but never escape. With fame, he found attention, but never satisfaction. And in the end, the man who once inspired desire across the world died with only one thing: his art. Yet his influence never really disappeared. Modern photographers still mimic his raw, sensual style. Directors cite his audacious visuals as inspiration, and actors still whisper about his mysterious charisma, the kind that can both make and ruin a career. Linda Evans went on to become an icon of strength. Bo Derek became a symbol of loyalty and reinvention. But John Derek? He became a question. Was he a visionary or a warning? A romantic or a manipulator? A genius or just a man too in love with the image of love itself? Maybe the truth is somewhere in between, because every story about beauty is also a story about loss, and every confession, no matter how raw, is really just a search for peace. John Derek's final confession wasn't about scandal or regret. It was about the one thing he never learned to do: forgive himself. Some people chase fame, others chase love. John Derek chased beauty and paid the ultimate price for it.
If you enjoyed this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really makes us smile. And if you're hungry for more fascinating tales, check out the 2 videos right below. You might just discover your next favorite story.